Under the same moon, we share the love, embracing the differences like hand in glove. Spreading peace and joy, it's a beautiful sight. Together we shine in each other's light. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world share in love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World. We have Stella in the building already. I want to tell you guys about something that is happening in regards to the President of the United States and the stock market. I think for those that pay attention, you might want to take these notes and write it down twice. Last week, I had reported to you guys that SoFi Technologies had fallen from $30 down to $14 a share. Would you imagine that? But remember how I told you guys how I was buying more? Because that's when you want to buy. You want to buy with the dip. Now, I'm not giving you financial advice. I'm just telling you how I do things. And perhaps you could do some research to see if it's something you would like to perhaps learn more about. But at any rate, would you believe that since last week, SoFi is already at $18? We're already up $4 from last week. Now, originally, when I told everyone to buy SoFi, or I was encouraging folks to check it out, it was around $5. It went all the way up to $30, but because of the market and the way the entire market is working in regards to the President of the United States, SoFi took a dip from 30 all the way down to 14. But the key point of that particular stock that I just want to mention to you guys is that the CEO of the company, Anthony Noto, when the stock reaches $45 a share, he gets roughly $450 million. So, based on when the dip happened, I also observed him as well. He was even buying more of the stock when it went down to $14. So, definitely, I'll put the stock ticker symbol in the chat so you could do your research. But since I even brought it up last week, the stock is up $4 a share. And it's a long way from where we originally purchased around $5. In fact, the other stock that I had mentioned, right, started off at $2, and now we are right around $50 a share. So imagine what a marvelous way to be able to build wealth, buying stocks that are under $5, $2, and watching it grow over time. All of this requires a lot of research. You could consult your financial advisor, but definitely looking into the stock market is worthwhile when it comes to these matters. Today, we're going to get into a few topics. We're going to talk about the Vice President of the United States and how he's taken a hard stand when it comes to the Pope. Would you believe we would see the Pope and the President of the United States going head to head, folks? What is this about? Is it about faith? Is it about pride? Is it about a President of the United States that even the Pope feels like he has to try to tame? Well, we're going to look at all of that. We're going to start off with JD Vance. He's stepping up to fight on behalf of the President of the United States, telling the Pope, hey, buddy, you need to stay over in your department. Stop snooping around in the government. Stay over into the department about theology and about the Bible. We'll take care of the government. So we're going to get started with that. I see we have some amazing people here. We have Nicole out of Texas. I'll be in Texas in a couple weeks for Carmelo Anthony. We have Stella in the building. Deborah, thank you guys so much for all you do. But let's get started. We're going to check out what's happening in regards to JD Vance. Let's get to it.
Thank you all. What a welcome. Hello, Athens. Yeah.
I think that's their thing. I like it.
That is definitely their thing. So I've been to 2 SEC schools with Turning Point USA, and my Ohio State brethren are ashamed of me.
Before we get started, Nicole says China has given Iran satellite access to intelligence on U.S. military bases. I would not be surprised. As a part of the new deal that was made, the president is saying that China has agreed because he's opening up the strait. We're going to get to that later in the show. But basically, China will not be giving Iran any more weapons. That's the deal on the table. But they did not mention intelligence. So thank you, Nicole, for sharing your intelligence. Thank you so much. I see we have Carol Reed. Thank you, Carol. Nice to see you here. Thanks for the support.
Because I've given you guys way more love than my own alma mater, but it's pretty good to be an SEC country, I have to say. It's great to be here.
We can help fix that. We can work on that. So for those of you wondering why I don't have really flowing, long, blonde hair right now, so I'm going to address it right at the front. Mr. Vice President, I'm on stage here instead of our friend Erica Kirk.
That's right.
Because
now, this is at the Turning Point event that Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated, had started. So keep that in mind as you see this develop. Also, hit the like button, share, subscribe, and also hit the hearts. Thank you very much.
unfortunately, she has received some very serious threats in her direction, which is terrible. It's a terrible reflection on the state of reality and the state of the country. But it underscores a larger point that she has received a lot of attacks from surprising places, perhaps.
Now, he's saying he doesn't have long blonde hair. He's basically saying, I'm not Erica Kirk, who is Charlie Kirk's wife, without saying her name. And he's saying now that she's under so much threat that he's filling in for her. That's for those that may not be familiar with the scenario.
Tell us what you think about that. Some of the people that have made, part-time jobs out of attacking Erica, and this is the net result.
Sure. Well, first of all, I love Erica, and I know that she did get some threats.
Now, I want you guys to keep in mind, remember Drewski put out a video where he put on the white face. A lot of people are pushing back saying, hey, if we can't put on blackface, then you shouldn't be able to put on white face. So Drewski is actually who they're kind of insinuating. So keep that in mind. Remember now, the president of the United States told Erica Kirk to sue Drewski based on the videos and the skits that he was putting out because she's saying it's defaming her name. So keep that backdrop in mind as we listen to what develops here.
And, about 2 hours ago, as you know, Andrew, I was a little worried that we were going to have to cancel the event because Erica was not going to come, and she was very worried about it. And I talked to the Secret Service, and obviously these guys do a very good job. And I said, you know what? Let's let Erica do what she needs to do for herself and her family. I'm sure Andrew will fill in. And let's go and make this an amazing event with the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens, Georgia. So absolutely, we're going to do this thing. But look, I mean, in so many ways, when did Charlie die? It was mid-September, I believe.
September 10th.
And in the past, that's right, it was the day right before September 11th. And in so many ways, the past 6 or so months have been 2 separate living hells for Erica Kirk.
And for those that follow the channel, shout out to Caprello. Good to see you. Awesome. Always glad to have you here, Caprello. I'll look out for you. So one thing I want you guys to keep in mind, remember, I cover the president every day and all things associated. He has not been giving any type of statements or press conferences for quite a while now. So keep that in mind. Typically, we're doing this every day, but he's been quite silent, trying to figure out what's happening in the Middle East. You can imagine it creates a lot of stress and pain.
And the first is, of course, that she lost her husband. She lost the father of her children. And I'll never forget this because, I mean, frankly, I think a lot about it because my wife is now pregnant with our 4th baby, is when we went and picked up, thank you. But when we went and picked up Charlie's body in Utah, and of course you were there with us, and I met Erica and I met the family. I mean, I met his parents and his little sister. And I just think about that moment and where she was so broken. And any of you know who anybody who's grieved before is you kind of go from just crestfallen and sad, and then you want to remember the person that you just lost. and there's just this constant flood of emotions, right? At one moment, you're laughing about something they said 2 years ago, and at another moment, you're sobbing because they're not there anymore. And I thought about that moment a lot because Eric.
Deborah makes a good point in regards to the president. She says he may have been advised to stay low. Good point.
Told me, and that was the first time she'd ever, told me this. And I guess I thought about it a lot in the context of our own, my wife's pregnancy. She said, I really wish that we had had more babies together. And that kind of hit me like, it's just it. He's gone. That was sort of one of the moments where I realized Charlie's not coming back here. And you have this mom who's really sad about the fact that her 2 little kids may never have memories. I mean, you think about like as a father, I know most of you out there are too young to have kids, but one of the things that you think about as a father is, I want my kids to remember this moment, right? I want my 6-year-old to remember when I took him to the zoo, or my 6-year-old son was just baptized on Easter Sunday, and I want him to remember that moment with me. And thank you. But so Erica's struggling with this, and of course that's terrible, unspeakable. Most of us cannot even put ourselves in her shoes, while at the same time, she's trying to make sure that Charlie's legacy doesn't die. And in that context, everybody is attacking her over everything, and they're lying about her. And it's one of the most disgraceful things that I've ever seen in public life. And I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in my life as a political leader. And I will tell you that the people who tell you, I was there with her, I was holding her hand, my wife was hugging her while we loaded Charlie's body onto Air Force Two and said the Lord's Prayer, the people telling you that Erica wasn't grieving her husband are full of shit. And we need to be honest about that fact. Excuse my language. My wife says I got to work on my language. She's been telling me that for 12 years, and it still hasn't taken. But the thing is, look, when you become a public figure, the natural thing, and I've talked to Erica about this privately, is a ton of crazy people say a ton of things about you that simply aren't true. But the thing that makes it so egregious with Erica is that she's a grieving person who's trying to carry on her husband's legacy. And look, we all do things that are wrong.
Now, I just want to mention to you guys, Joe Kent, who we've been covering here lately, he was, as of about 3 weeks ago, he was the lead for counterterrorism here in the United States. He resigned because he said this war we were being lied about it. He felt like we should not be sending our children to fight this war. This is Israel's war. One of the things that he stated in an interview is that Israel may have had something to do with Charlie Kirk's death, similar to what we see what happens with Candace Owens. Now, I've been following this case, and I don't believe necessarily that that's true. I think they have a good candidate on trial. His name is Tyler Robertson. But keep all of this in mind as we continue watching this.
You want to, criticize Turning Point USA for not taking this position or having this political disagreement, or maybe it should do this or that. That's all above board. But to say that Erica Kirk wasn't grieving her husband on that day, to say that Erica Kirk was somehow complicit in it, is so preposterous and so disgusting. And it's one of the things that has broken, I think, the American public conversation of the last 6 months. I mean, Andrew, we could talk about this for a long time. Charlie's absence, I felt it so many times in so many different ways. There have been so many times where I wanted to call Charlie and say, man, you've got to call this person, or man, you've got to put this event together so we can help this candidate, or just to bounce ideas off of as a friend. There have been so many ways in which I felt that void. But one of the ways in which I felt that void is that it's like the response to Charlie Kirk.
Okay, guys, the underboss says Charlie started talking about Israel and the files, and immediately it resulted in the result. Okay, Go Green. Thank you guys for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Go Green says, hope your kids are not affected by your legacy. All right.
Dying. The response to Charlie Kirk getting assassinated by a left-wing furry lover is, the response should have been, let's go after left-wing violence and terrorism. Let's defund the networks of left-wing violence and terrorism. That's what we've been doing in Washington, D.C., and that's what we've been fighting for every single day. You know, Savannah Hernandez, of course, was assaulted in Minnesota a couple days ago. I talked to Kash Patel on the way down here, and I said, I assume that we're doing something here. And he said, yes, we've had multiple agents on the ground. We've already talked to Savannah. We're going to use the video to try to go after the people who assaulted her and then try to defund the networks that fund those radicals who are going around assaulting activists. That's what we should be doing. And I know that politics is hard, and I know that it's challenging, and I know that things aren't always easy, and we're going to have disagreements even within our coalition. But if you're going after Erica Kirk and not the people who are trying to destroy the United States of America, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Yeah, amen. You know, I think that's really well said, Mr. Vice President, and I always try and remember that Erica has to live with this constant reality that her kids are one parent away from being orphans. And so we take that extremely seriously. And as you mentioned, what happened with Savannah, and I think it's just important that we remember that we're dealing with humans. These are human beings.
Yeah, you know, exactly. And I've heard some people say, well, you know, Erica was smiling 2 days after Charlie Kirk died or something like that. And it's like, most of us in this room have grieved somebody that we loved. You know, maybe, hopefully not a spouse who dies in the prime of their life, but when you deal with somebody who's grieving, it's always this weird combination of emotions. It's intense sadness, intense affection. It's, you know, you sort of love that person in that moment, maybe more than you ever have because you feel their absence. You think about all the happy moments that you had and you can't help but smile. And then you remember they're not there and you can't help but sob. That's what grief is like. And so, again, if your instinct is to go after not the left-wing radicals who are assaulting Savannah, or not the people who shot Charlie Kirk, but if your instinct is to go after a young mother because she's grieving in a way that you find you find wrong, well, why don't you stay in your lane and mind your own business?
Yeah, amen.
Grief is complicated, and you know, so there's another angle of this, Andrew, which is just so absurd, which is that, you know, people will say that, you know, Erica, you know, she's been doing this or she's been doing that, and I would be doing something different. And it's like, first of all, that's fine. Like, if you want to criticize somebody because you have a disagreement, disagree with my politics, disagree with something that Erica or Andrew say on the Turning Point podcast, but this desire to go after her for the way she's grieving her husband, that's the most preposterous thing I've seen in a very long time, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in politics.
Amen. Thank you for saying that, Mr. Vice President. So I think this segues very well into our next question here. You are a practicing Catholic. You're, despite your language, you're attempting to be a faithful Catholic.
That's right. That's right.
I think it was well placed, if I may say.
It.
Wow, so he's a Catholic pushing back on the Pope. Let's see how this comes together.
I'm sure you've seen that the Vatican and the Pope and the President have been in the news lately. So as a Catholic, what does it feel like to be, you know, in the middle of that?
I thought it was going to be easy questions. This is kind of a tough question here.
Nope, no easy ones there.
So here's the thing about this. So first of all, you will sometimes hear people say, well, you know, the Vatican, the church, whether it's the Protestant church, the Catholic church, like, you know, they should preach the gospel, they should ignore public policy. I actually don't agree with that. I actually think that it's a good thing when Christian leaders, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, part of preaching the gospel is talking about how the gospel applies to the issues of the day. So I've never been one of these people who say that you should never have, you know, Christian leadership not talking about politics, or frankly, political leaders not talking about their Christian faith. But I do think that we have to remember that, you know, each of us has our own role. I'm the Vice President of the United States. The fundamental way I understand my role is that I'm trying to take the lessons, the moral truths that are rooted in Christianity, and I'm trying to apply them to a whole host of complicated real world scenarios. You know, thank you. So my job is to apply moral truth to try to do the best thing for the American people. That's my job. And that's the President of the United States' job. And of course, he's the person who leads our administration. The Pope's job is to preach the gospel. Okay? And again, I think that sometimes in the context, like, it doesn't bother me, even when I disagree with him. And I have a lot of respect for the Pope. I like him. I admire him. I've gotten to know him a little bit.
I'd say Billy, light and sweet. Thank you.
It doesn't bother me when he speaks on issues of the day, frankly, even when I disagree with how he's applying a particular principle. So the most obvious example is, it has frustrated me that some of the Catholic clergy have attacked mercilessly the Trump administration on immigration. It is a constant idea that somehow everything that the Trump administration does when it comes to securing our borders is inhumane. And my constant response to that is, how is it humane to allow drug traffickers and sex traffickers to bring little kids across the southern border?
Amen.
How is that humane? But again, I'd almost rather have the conversation. So I kind of like, even when there's disagreement, I like it when the Pope comments on questions of immigration. I like it when the Pope talks about abortion. I like it when the Pope talks about matters of war and peace, because I think that at the very least it invites a conversation. So I think some people, their reaction to this is to say, well, he shouldn't have said that. And look, there are certainly things that the Pope has said in the last few months that I disagree with. Let me just take like one very concrete example, related to this conflict in Iran. So the Pope said something where he said, and I'm going to try to remember the exact quote, but he said that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword. God is never on the side of those who wield the sword. I'm pretty sure that he said that exact statement. Now, on the one hand, again, I like that the Pope is an advocate for peace. I think that's certainly one of his roles. On the other hand, how can you say that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword? Was God on the side of the Americans who liberated France from the Nazis? Was God on the side of the Americans who liberated Holocaust camps and liberated those innocent people from, those who had survived the Holocaust? I certainly think the answer is yes, and I agree. Jesus Christ does not. I agree.
All right, so this is where the audience is going to start cooking him.
Jesus Christ certainly does not support genocide. Whoever yelled that out from the dark, he certainly does not. I think that's pretty easy. I think that's a pretty easy principle. Okay, so here's a guy. Let me just say this. This is a guy. No. First of all, random dude who's shouting, can I finish my point and then I'll respond to what you just shouted? Is that okay? Okay, great.
Yeah, can we give him 1 second to answer this?
So let me just finish this question on the Pope, and then I want to respond to what this guy said. So, number one, when the Pope says that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword, there is more than a 1,000-year tradition of just war.
Guys, Underball says, doesn't the Bible, God, not talk about how to slay your enemies? That's what the Hebrew scriptures primarily talks about, right?
Theory. Okay? Now, we can, of course, have disagreements about whether this or that conflict is just, but I think that it's important, in the same way that it's important for the Vice President of the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy. I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology. And I think that one of these issues here is that there has been, again, hey, random dude screaming, I told you I'd respond to your point. I just want to respond to this question first. But I think one of the issues here is that if you're going to opine on matters of theology, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure it's anchored in the truth. And that's one of the things that I try to do. And
thank you, July, for the super chat. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. Thanks for all you do. That's awfully kind of you. Thank you.
Certainly something I would expect from the clergy, whether they're Catholic or Protestant. Now, to respond to this guy here, he said, I believe he said the administration supports a genocide in Gaza. And here's my response to that. When we came in, the humanitarian situation in Gaza was an absolute catastrophe. You know who's the person who got a peace agreement in Gaza? Donald J. Trump. So if you want to complain about what happened in Gaza, So if you want, sir, to complain about what happened in Gaza, why don't you complain about Joe Biden and the last administration? We're the administration that solved that problem. And by the way, not only was our administration like the administration that solved the problem, but the president. Excuse me, sir. Right now, you see more humanitarian aid coming into Gaza than it has any time in the past 5 years, because we have taken that situation seriously. And that's one of the things that I'm proud of about our administration, is whether it's there or Thailand and Cambodia, we have consistently tried as much as we can to solve these problems, not just complain about them like the guy who just ran away angry.
You know, JD, I'll never forget your speech at Charlie's memorial, and you talked about how your faith in the wake of Charlie's assassination has become so central to you. You talk about it more, and now you're even writing a book about it.
Sure.
Tell us about it. And what's it called? It's called the Wake.
Well, it's called Communion, and you know, I think the subtitle is Finding My Way Back to Faith.
Yes.
And you know, here's why I wanted to write this book, Andrew, because you know, I think that like a lot of you, there was a point in my life. I mean, you're probably this is probably a much more Christian audience than maybe I was when I was a 22-year-old college student. I just gotten out of the Marine Corps, and I realized that I was sort of winning this game of life in one sense, and I was losing it in the way that mattered. And, you know, I was raised in a Christian household. I was raised in a very sort of Pentecostal family. You know, our church had really good music and amazing people. And one of the things I love about evangelical culture in the United States of America is just how welcoming it is of everybody, right? And you know that. You're an evangelical Christian. And so the thing is, I hadn't been properly formed in my faith. And so I got to the Marine Corps, and by the time I left the Marine Corps and it was starting college, I called myself an atheist. And I kind of went through this period of being an angry atheist, and then I realized when I got to a point where I thought to myself, what actually matters in life? It's not getting into a law school, which I had done. It's not making a lot of money. It's not credentials. It's not good jobs. It's being a good person. It's, you know, I'd fallen in love with this, thank you. I'd fallen in love with a girl, and that girl eventually became my wife and the mother to our now 4 children. And I remember thinking to myself, like, she doesn't care whether I make a certain amount of money. She wants me to be a good husband. She wants me to be a good father. She wants me to be a virtuous person. And I started to realize
she wants date night.
Yes, she does want that, which is hard when you're vice president of the United States. But what I realized is that the philosophy of secular liberalism, it was achieve. Get as many credentials, make as much money as possible, and that left me feeling empty. And meanwhile, it was this faith that I had discarded as a kid, which actually provided a real sense of meaning and purpose. And then I talked to a priest, and this priest was like, you know what? If you think that the Christian faith is right about all these moral questions, maybe it's right because there's a witness element to it. Like maybe the fact that it's right about morality and about virtue and about sin, maybe that means it's also right about the fact that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. Maybe it's also right that Jesus Christ died and rose from the dead on the 3rd day. Like maybe these things that appeal to you about the Christian faith come from the deeper truth of the Christian faith. And that kind of got me down a pathway of where eventually I was baptized and became a very devout Christian. And at this point, amen. Thank you.
Amen.
But, you know, I thought, first of all, a lot of people have asked me about that journey. And I thought, what better way than to sit down and actually force myself to write it out? I actually started writing the book back in 2017, right after Usha had our first baby, my son Ewan, who's now 8 years old. And so I've been kind of writing it off and on since then. And, a little bit Charlie's death, a little bit just being in the public eye, but mostly just I've been at this thing for 10 years and I was like, it's finally time to get it out there. And so I put the finishing touches on it, submitted to the publisher a couple of months ago, and it's coming out in June. So buy the book, Communion.
I love that. Not that that wasn't also really riveting, but we're getting to the part of the interview that I'm really excited about. You are working on fraud. You're the fraud czar.
Yes.
How many bad guys? Yes, we can. How many bad guys are we going to get? I mean, that's the way there's a really nice framing of this question that I worked on. No. I want to know, what's the progress? Tell us about it.
Well, we've already gotten a lot of bad guys. And this is, one of the things I'm very proud about is that, people don't just want talk. They want action. They want us to actually go and arrest the people who committed fraud. And that's happening. We're starting to do that. Good. And that's a good thing. And a lot more is going to be happening in the future. But actually, who's been amazing on this is Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz, who runs the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, because so much of the fraud in our system is people who are defrauding Medicare and Medicaid. Let me just give you a couple of examples. So we have in South Florida, we have entire companies that sell medical devices. They sell prosthetic knees and they sell prosthetic hips. And you know that they've received hundreds of millions.
Guys, here's a good point for 2026. Doge recommended 0 fraud cases to the DOJ, Department of Justice.
Some of them billions of dollars in government funds, and they've never shipped a single product. They're just set up by fraudsters, and there's so many of them, and many of them haven't. There are like over 100 of these companies that haven't shipped a single product. Okay, I'll give you another example of fraud. So this ridiculous situation with Somali fraudsters in Minneapolis, in the Minneapolis area. So you have a program that exists to help autistic children get the resources they need, to help their parents, find them a ride to school, or if they need after school support, to make sure their parents have what they need. And that program has been defrauded by Somali fraudsters who will go in, who will say that we have 3 kids, every single one of them is autistic, there's no verification from the state of Minnesota, so that family will receive tens of thousands of dollars from the taxpayer, and then the autistic children in Minneapolis who actually do need those services, the money's not there anymore because it's been taken away by fraudsters. We've completely stopped the funding to that program, and we basically told the state of Minnesota, you don't get any more of our money unless you verify that you're taking fraud seriously. So we just turned it off. But what Dr. Oz, working with some of the people in our Department of Justice, found is that in Southern California, you had all these people who were engaged in massive fraud against the Medicare system. You had just tons and tons of people getting rich off fraud. And so we had our sort of
all things, they were getting rich off of hospice. How in the world do you get rich off of hospice?
Our weekly fraud check-in call 2 weeks ago, and Dr. Oz called in, but he's like, hey, I got to go because I'm about to hop on the bus and we're going to go arrest a bunch of fraudsters in Los Angeles. And I was like, that's exactly what I want you to do. By all means, get off the phone. So we're doing a lot of that stuff. And I think one of the biggest things and the most important things we're doing on this, Andrew, is that there was sort of in the Biden administration, probably intentionally, but...
So you have Nick Shirley, who is a YouTube creator. He goes out, he finds the crime in America, and then the government goes and arrests the people. Would you believe that this would be the reality of life at this time?
Regardless, this attitude of if you were committing fraud of under $1 million, you were committing fraud of under $1.5 million, we're just going to look the other way. And the approach that we've taken in the last...
Maybe we could get Nick Shirley to find Nancy Guthrie, right?
...couple of months is no amount of fraud is too big or too small. If you're defrauding the taxpayer, you ought to go to prison, and anybody who's helping you ought to go to prison too.
That's great. I mean, I think this is one of the absolute slam dunk issues. How many of you guys out in this audience care about American taxpayers getting ripped off? Right? This is like a 90-10, 99-1 issue.
The guy who was shouting at us earlier, he doesn't care at all about people getting ripped off by fraud.
But, I think it underscores a bigger...
Guys, can we get the likes up, hit the thumbs up, share, subscribe. Thank you. Turn on your notifications. It all goes far. Thank you.
...problem, right? Because there's a lot of young people...
What's up, Portia?
...in this room, okay? A lot of you had some very formative years ripped off as well during COVID. You didn't get to do prom.
Absolutely.
You didn't get graduation. There were so many things taken from you. And, you entered into the college years maybe with really anemic.
Groundsky says, suffering for the poor to feed the rich. Great point. Thank you. We have Angelo in the building.
Workforce environment, inflation, historic, life's expensive. What do you tell young people right now that even right now they're wondering, what's the future that I can get? What's the career I can get? Can I afford to have a family, kids, buy a home? What's your message to them right now that have big questions ahead of their future?
I think my message to young people who are wondering whether they can afford a family, whether they can afford a home, whether they can afford, kids and the American dream is, you guys have every right to demand more of your elected leadership. And my job is to make it as possible for the answer to that question to be yes. And fundamentally, the question you should ask your politicians is exactly that. Are you pursuing policies that make it easier for me to afford a house, easier for me to get a good job, easier for me to get a good education, and easier for me to raise my family in safety and security and comfort? That is the fundamental issue. And the thing that bothered me so much about the last administration, there are all these unique policies that I could sort of point to that were disastrous, and a lot of them were absolutely terrible. But so much of it goes back to housing and immigration and the connection between the two. Under the 4 years that Joe Biden was president, housing literally doubled in value. Meaning if you're a young person trying to buy a house, it costs twice as much as it did before. And you layer.
I want to take a minute to stop. Previously, he had insinuated that it was Joe Biden that was responsible for genocide when it comes to the people of Gaza, and that Donald Trump came in and put an end to it. Put a 1 in the chat if you think that's true, that Joe Biden, along with Israel, was pushing genocide on the Gazan people, and the president resolved it. Or put a 2 if you think that's not true. Let's see what you guys have to say.
On top of that, higher interest rates. That's just in 4 years. Nobody can afford that kind of inflation in the housing market. And one of the biggest drivers of it is the fact that we let in tens of millions of illegal aliens. People who shouldn't have been here, who are taking homes that ought by right go to you and your generation. And so what have we done in the Trump administration? We've shut the border. We've kicked a lot of those people who have come into the United States. We've kicked them out of our country. And importantly, we have actually instituted a ban on institutional investors buying up American homes. Because I don't want private equity firms, many of them backed by foreign money, to buy American homes. I want you guys to be able to buy American homes. And I will say, and I say this not to brag, because I think you guys should be impatient. When a politician comes to you and tells you, I've done all these things, you should be asking, good, now go and do more. That's how I think of my job. I don't wake up and say, oh, we did something really good last week. I think to myself, we did something good last week, now let's go do more of it, or let's go do something different. Because maybe the statistic that I'm proudest of in the entire Trump administration is that over the last 8 months, rents and home prices have come down. Not stayed the same, they have come down. And what I think of as our ultimate ambition is that after another few years of this administration, of stopping private equity barons from buying up homes, from kicking out more illegal immigrants, from securing the border, what we're going to see is housing that is much more affordable, and then we're going to keep on building on it year after year after year, because the American dream should not be sold to the highest foreign bidder. It belongs to you.
Yeah. That's so well said, and a lot of the people in this audience will know that this is one of the issues.
You can kind of tell that he has programmed talking points, kind of like Charlie Kirk. He just has these talking points that he carries with him. It's rather unique, if you ask me.
Issues near and dear to Charlie's heart as well, to make sure that you guys could afford the American dream, that we thought about you first as a country, and so thank you for saying it so well. Naturally, we have to ask about
My grandfather had a different name for it, but I can't say it on YouTube.
What's going on in Iran.
Sure.
So, but I just want everybody, I want to give the vice president his due here, because you have been to Europe in the last week, then you flew back to the United States, only to fly back across the globe to negotiate in Pakistan, to come back, and somehow we called them, we're like, are you really going to come to Georgia? And he's like, I'll be there. So I want to give him a big round of applause.
Thank you.
I mean, may I just say that's almost Trumpian level endurance. So, do you know what time zone you are and how many hours of sleep did you get?
I have no idea what the hell time it is right now. And it's kind of good, actually, because you just run on coffee, and then you sleep when you can, you wake up when you have to, and you just drink a whole lot of coffee. And, you know, look, it's the job that I asked for, but yes, I will say, look, I think that, let me just say, U.S. young people, and I want to make some observation because it made me think of something, which is that young people in the United States.
Welcome back to PG. PG says JD is flying all over the world and failing. Okay, Browlerton says Dems love increasing taxes. They just can't get enough of it. All right. Thank you, guys.
States, but particularly young Americans in the conservative movement. I think that we have a tendency to get too black-pilled. And here's what I say by this. We have a tendency to get too cynical, too pessimistic. Like, I'm sure that I've said mostly things that you agree with, and I'm sure that I've said some things you may not agree with, and you may not agree with
Steve says he's got talent. He knows how to ride those airplanes.
everything that I say about the Iran negotiation, which I will get to answer your question. But here's fundamentally the issue. When you see a politician, or you see a political movement, or you see an administration that isn't doing what you want to do, I think you have two choices. You can say, to hell with those people and check out of the process. Or you can say, you know what? I'm going to get more involved. I'm going to make my voice heard even more.
Guys, I know this is not the typical show, but we do cover all of the blurbs from the president and also the vice president. That's how we stay astute to what's happening in the world. But bear with us. We're going to get to the news after this is over in about 20 minutes.
I'm going to pressure that administration to do exactly what I want them to do because they got my vote. They earned my vote, but they can't take it for granted. And I've seen some of this, you know, on various issues. Like for example, I recognize that a lot of young voters don't love the policy that we have in the Middle East. Okay, I understand that. I also know that we've secured the border. We've lowered housing prices now for 8 months in a row, and there's going to be more to come beyond that. We've made America energy dominant, which has lowered electricity costs and things like that. We've made it so that we have the lowest murder rate in 127 years. I'm not saying you have to agree with me on every issue. I'm not saying you have to agree with me on every issue. What I'm saying is don't get disengaged because you disagree with the administration on one topic. Get more involved. Make your voice heard even more. That's how we ultimately take the country back. It's not by you, you know, if you get 5 things you want and 1 thing you don't want. I see way too many people, especially in sort of the online conservative, you know, Twitter sphere, who say, you know, there's no point. No. Because, or let me give you another example, the SAVE Act, okay? A lot of people want the SAVE Act. I want the SAVE Act. I've been fighting for the SAVE Act literally since day one of the administration. And I've seen a lot of people saying, what the hell's the point of voting for these guys if, you know, you've got 3 Republicans joining with the Democrats to prevent the SAVE Act from passing, or I guess 4 Republicans.
Okay, we're calling on all of our government intellectuals, anybody astute. Tell us what the SAVE Act is. Let's put those points in the chat, the SAVE Act.
And here's my response to that. Yes, it is annoying to me that there are only 45 or 46 Republicans who will fight politically to get the SAVE Act passed. But you know what? 10 years ago, that number was 35. So the answer to frustration is engagement. Don't give up on this process. Get more involved in this process and demand more from people like me. That's how we take our country back. I just think it's important to say that.
That's such a good point. How the Senate is such an example, as frustrating as it is, but you were part of that new wave of new thinking, of new energy, a new generation.
Thank you, Larkin. Larkin says that is base voter ID. Thank you.
Yes, and there's so many new voices that are bringing real change to the Senate. I mean, we're 1-2 elections away from maybe having it all the way around.
100%. And I understand people get frustrated at it. I get frustrated at it, but it's a lot better than it was 10 years ago. And frankly, 10 years ago, it was a lot better than it was 10 years before that. But here's where we are on fundamentally the president set a policy. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And right now we are negotiating to make sure that very thing happens. And here's, you know, what's interesting about this is
That's right, PG. Save Act, voter suppression. Thank you so much.
What's interesting about this is that we have this ceasefire that's in place. I think it's 6 or 7 days old. Right now, the ceasefire is holding. And what you're seeing is what the president wants to make, he doesn't want to make like a small deal. He wants to make the grand bargain. And what he's basically offering to Iran is very simple. And frankly, it's something that no president has had the ability to offer. He said that if you're willing to act like a normal country, we are willing to treat you economically like a normal country. He doesn't want a small deal. And that's one of the reasons why, one, I'd say in Pakistan, we made a ton of progress. But the reason why the deal is not yet done is because the president, he really wants a deal where Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, Iran is not state sponsoring terrorism, but also the people of Iran can thrive and prosper and join the world economy. And that's the trade that he's offering. He's saying, if you guys...
Okay, guys, how much, I want someone to tell me for $25, how much uranium does Iran have? Can you tell us in the comment section?
He said, if you guys commit to not having a nuclear weapon, we are going to make Iran thrive. We're going to make it economically prosperous, and we're going to invite the Iranian people into the world economy in a way they haven't been in my entire life. And that's the kind of Trumpian grand bargain that the president has put on the table. Man, we're going to keep on negotiating and try to make it happen because it would be great for the world. It'd be great for our country. It'd be great for everybody. So I'm going to keep on fighting to make it happen.
Yeah. Just a few more, and then we've got a few
please. I know we have some questions from the audience, too.
My one question is, when you looked across from these Iranian negotiators, what did you make of them? Did you get the sense that they really were the right people? I mean, I'm assuming you guys know this type of thing, but...
Yeah, I mean, look, you never know. The United States had never had meetings at that level with the Iranian government in 49 years. Wow. Like, it's a meeting that had never before happened. Not Democrat, not Republican. We had never had a meeting like that where you have, the person who's effectively running the country in Iran sitting across from the Vice President of the United States. That had never happened. And what look, honestly, after 49 years, there's a lot of course, mistrust between Iran and the United States of America. You're not going to solve that problem overnight. But yeah, I think the people we were sitting across from wanted to make a deal. And I know the President of the United States told us to go out there and negotiate in good faith. That's what we did. That's what we're going to keep on doing. So you never know, though.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I've sat across from United States senators that I thought I agreed with. And
can you guys see him, JD Vance, becoming the president of the United States of America? Put a 1 in the chat if you think so. Put a 2 if no way.
You don't know what those people, right? I won't say who. You can guess. But I feel very good about where we are.
Great. All right, so this is the last one from me. Now, a lot of people make a big deal about illegal immigration, and we should. It's terrible, right? And this administration has made historic progress on that issue. I think you don't get enough credit for it. And the problem with immigration, illegal immigration, is once it's not a problem anymore, our memories are about 6 days long, and we move on to the
Welcome back, Tim.
next thing. But what about legal immigration?
Sure.
And reforming it, correcting it, addressing abuses? Because I look around here and I see a bunch of American students that want jobs, that want homes, that want a space in this country. And I think reforming legal is so critical. Maybe talk about some of the reforms that this administration has done specifically on the legal front.
So this is exactly right. And this is 100%, I think one of the first pieces of legislation I sponsored in the United States Senate was effectively to get rid of the H-1B visa, because I cared so much about this when I was in the Senate. And yes, it is the case that Congress has not exactly come along. There, again, to my point about the United States Senate, there are far more people who are sponsoring that legislation today than there were 10 years ago, but it's not nearly enough to get it through. But just through administrative action, I don't think people realize this, the number of new H-1B visas is down about 90% in the United States of America. Like, that's something that we accomplished purely through... That's something we accomplished purely through administrative action. And again, it's something I cared a lot about. It's something the president cared a lot about. So, there are other things too. There are ways in which, our visa system is taken completely.
You know what's insane is that we're so far along into the president's candidacy, Donald J. Trump, and we don't have there's no strong Democratic leader coming forth to run for president for the next cycle, right? You have to wonder, why is that the case?
The advantage of.
I did hear that Kamala's going to run again, but other than that, it's been pretty quiet.
One of the biggest loopholes in American immigration, legal immigration policy, and I'll never forget my debate against Tim Walz, where the moderator tried to fact check me because I said this person is an illegal immigrant. It's like, no, actually, they came in as an asylum claimant. And it's like, if you came in on a fraudulent asylum claim, you are an illegal immigrant, whatever the hell somebody from CBS says that you are. And the asylum process was, I mean, there were literally millions of people coming into the United States every single year on false asylum claims. We have those claims down something like north of 95%. So there are all of these things that you can do, purely through administrative action. But for us to really make this stick, I mean, look, as much as I don't want this to happen, eventually, hopefully 20 years from now, you're going to have a Democratic president who tries to undo everything that we've done on immigration. That's why we need Congress to codify this stuff. But right now, I'm very proud of what we've done in the Trump administration. Massive reductions in fraudulent visas, massive reductions in fraudulent number of asylum claims, massive reduction in H-1B visas granted. We're making a lot of progress. As I said to you, we want to make more. We're certainly going to make more over the remaining 3 years. But what that means, fundamentally, is you guys deserve to have good jobs. And I don't want, when you graduate from this amazing university.
I heard that The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is polling higher than Kamala Harris. Did you hear that?
And it hurts me to say that as an Ohio State fan, but this is an amazing university. When you graduate, I think the guy who was screaming earlier, he's clearly a Michigan guy. Just put it on the table. Oh no, we have another Michigan guy over here. But
they did win the Natty. So
yes, that's right. But when you guys graduate from this university, I don't want you competing against a low-wage foreigner for your first job. I want a company to have to pay you a fair wage for a fair day's work. It's like common sense. But to do that, you really have to do reform of the H-1B and other, it's not just the H-1B, a number of the other visa systems. We made a lot of progress, but man, I would love a Congress. And you guys advocated. Ask yourself, I mean, you have a Senate primary going on right now. This is what I say about getting more involved. Every single one of you should ask those Senate candidates, what do you think about the H-1B visa? Would you co-sponsor the vice president, former senator's legislation to eliminate that program because it's basically just something that big tech companies take advantage of? These are the things that you guys have to do, because I can't keep these politicians honest by myself. I need your help. It's a very big job.
Great stuff. So, thank you, Mr. Vice President. We have some questions. I believe we're ready for some questions for.
Yeah, let's do some questions from the audience.
Oh, right here.
Okay, there we are. Hello.
Hi, my name is Hope. I have a serious question and then a fun question.
Okay.
So your serious question is, when you were growing up, who was your voice/influencer that helped you see your conservative views? And then for now, who can we look at as an influencer or like a voice?
Okay, so that's very interesting. So, when I was a kid and I was kind of developing my politics, there was actually a radio host, a guy who founded this organization called Focus on the Family, James Dobson, who was really influential to me. And he was just, he was a good Christian guy. He talked about the family. He talked about things I cared a lot about. And I came from a broken home. So when he talked about the ways in which a broken home had a negative effect on kids, it made sense to me because I was seeing it in my own life. And then here was a guy who was actually talking about it. And what I liked about him is that he didn't talk about it in this judgmental way, right? He wasn't attacking a kid like me who didn't have everything handed to him. He was just explaining in a very real world, with a fundamentally Christian underpinning, here's what happens when things are broken. And, when you ask who are some of the conservative influencers or the political influencers today, And there are a few people that I look to who I think have very, very smart and wise spiritual wisdom. I mean, like, I think Andrew and Blake and the podcast that they have at TPUSA is amazing. I listen to it all the time. I think it's great. You know, I think if you want a good laugh, I love Theo Von. Like, he's one of my favorite. I think he's just incredible. And he's got one of these senses of humor where, like, 30% of the time it goes completely over my head, and 70% of the time he's the funniest person imaginable. But I think Theo has a good heart, and that's one of the reasons why I really like listening to his show. And then just in terms of, like, you know, pure politics, of course you should be listening to the Vice President of these United States. Thank you.
And then my fun question is, if you could have a free day with 0 responsibilities, what would your day look like?
Oh, that's a good question. And honestly, I would add not just 0 responsibilities, but total anonymity. Because the thing that I love this job. It's very cool. I'm very honored to have it. But what I really want to do, honestly, is take Usha and the 3 kids and just walk to a local cafe, eat a ton of pancakes, and then take the kids to the zoo without anybody knowing who the hell I am. That's what I would do if I had a day.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's a very nice question.
All right, hi JD. My name is Jacob, and I'm also from Cincinnati. So I get you. I'm with you there on the zoo. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
so.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyway, my question is that there's a lot of division within our country right now, from right to left and everybody in between. And leading up to the 2024 election and Charlie's death, I found that Charlie was definitely the glue that held at least the conservative movement together.
Right.
And since he has passed, there's been a lot of division within our conservative movement, and especially with the 2026 midterms and the 2028 election coming up. How do you think the conservative movement can be united? And if there is a who do you...
Guys, let's hit the like button, share, subscribe. Thank you. Keep hitting the hearts if you don't mind. Thank you.
do you think that could be?
Well, that's a very good question. And look, man, I agree with you. I think part of the division is Charlie's death, because Charlie, as Andrew knows well, and a lot of this was behind the scenes, Charlie was the guy who was talking to different segments of the movement, right? So, I mean, just this Iran thing. Charlie would be the guy who was talking to the people who really wanted to go to war with Iran and the people who really didn't want to go to war with Iran. And he would try to find ways for those guys to work together, even if they disagreed over one issue, right? And so Charlie's absence is a huge thing. And my answer to your question is, who replaces Charlie Kirk? I think it's going to be a combination of people. I think Andrew's got a role. I've got a role. You guys have got a role. And I think the most important thing to remember about how Charlie thought about
Lisa, send me an email in regards to what's happening with those comments that are being withheld so we could get to the bottom of it. Thank you.
this is he always recognized what was the goal and who was the real problem. The real problem is not a person who disagrees with you about this or that foreign policy or domestic policy issue. The real problem is the person who killed our friend and anybody who defended the people who killed our friend. And we got to keep our eye on the ball and recognize that those who want to kill conservatives because they have the wrong viewpoints, we need to defeat those people. We need to
Country Carpenter, how are you, friend?
unite with each other and actually fight together to defeat the real enemy that's out there. That's the most important message. And I'll also give you, one of the reasons why I'm optimistic about this is, even when Charlie was alive, you saw some of these divisions starting to bubble to the surface, okay? And I remember, Charlie died in September of 2025. I hadn't been vice president, I'd been vice president for all of 8 months when Charlie lost his life to an assassin's gun. One thing that makes people in politics sort of divide against each other is just being in power, right? When you have control of the House, the Senate, the White House, and there's not an election around the horizon, it's very easy to forget what your goal is. Well, starting in a few months, we're going to have primaries that are over, we're going to have candidates on the ballot, and we're all going to need to get out there and work hard, because the people who want to kill Donald Trump, the people who want to throw Donald Trump in prison, the people who murdered our friend, and then the people who celebrated it afterwards, those people are trying to achieve political power. We cannot let them, and we have to unite to make sure that doesn't happen.
Amen. Thank you, JD.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. Thank you for taking the time to come out here. My name is Dane Hoff. I'm originally from the great state of
Do you guys think this guy is patriotic? Tell me what you think.
Arizona and proudly voted for you and Donald J. Trump in November 2024.
Here we go.
And my question is that many people believe the midterms are already gone for us. I disagree. So what is the game plan to win the midterms? And what's the strategy to maintain the coalitions Trump won in 24?
So number one is, I totally agree with you. The idea that midterms are gone is preposterous. And if you go back to 2018 and you look at the polling picture in 2018, that was Trump's first term. And what it showed is that Republicans were getting crushed in the generic ballot by 10, 11, 12 points. The worst polls right now, the worst polls, not all of them, the worst polls have us down by 5 or 6 points. Okay? And what happened in 2018 is that as we got closer to the election, and again, the right kind of unified in the face of an election campaign, what happened is those margins narrowed, and the Republican Party did much better than expected in 2018. It wasn't a great election by any means, but the idea that this is done now, it's ridiculous, and frankly, it's cynical, pessimistic garbage pushed by people who want us to completely give up. Don't give up. We got to keep on fighting. That's the fundamental and most important thing, is the people telling you to give up on the midterms are the people who want us to lose the midterms. Don't listen to them.
Lisa, take some screenshots so I can see what you're talking about, because I can't see it from my reference point.
But what's the game plan? You asked what the game plan is. So I'll give you a little good news and a little bad news on that, because the bad news and the good news about the modern Congress is, whether you agree with this or not, the districts are so gerrymandered, there aren't that many battleground congressional districts left. Like if you go back to 2014, where I think Republicans won like 80 seats in the House, that's not going to happen. Elections like that don't happen anymore. So what we got to fight is 20 or 30 districts where there's actually some real competition in those districts. We got to put a lot of resources. We got to knock on a lot of doors. We got to get out the marginal Trump voter. Because one of the things we saw in 2024 is a lot of our voters, they're dedicated, they love the president, they don't show up in midterm elections. So we got to knock on as many doors and make sure those people get out and vote. We have a game plan, but the House is going to be determined by 20 or 30 seats. We just got to win as many of those as possible. And yes, we can win the midterms in 2026.
Thank you.
And we should say what's happening in Virginia, you know?
Exactly. I mean, and then this is the thing. Democrats always...
Virginia is my home state. That's where I came out of, but I'm in New York now. I think I'm going to stay in New York.
Overreact. They always overreach. They always do crazy things. And there are districts where, you know, MSNBC will say, well, this district, you know, Donald Trump won it by 20 points, and then, you know, this guy only won it by 12 points. That means everything's terrible. You look in Virginia or look at some of these other places where, you know, Kamala Harris won it by 4 points, and now Republicans are winning by a few points. There's a lot of reason to think that we have a good chance here. We just got to keep on working at it. Sorry, next question.
And the redistricting, make sure if you're watching in Virginia.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. Virginia, vote against the Obama-Spangenberger redistricting plan.
Yep.
Vote against it. And frankly, the polls are moving in our direction a little bit. We just got to get out there and defeat that ballot measure.
Hi, Mr. Vice President. Thank you so much for being here. It's truly incredible that you can come all across the world and then just be in Athens. So my question, not to sound pessimistic, but my question revolves around Congress.
Sure.
And, you know, many Americans feel discouraged, even somewhat dissatisfied. You know, the executive sets out a plan. We know you want to do something, but Congress sometimes is just unable to deliver. And with, you know, the inability to keep the government open during shutdowns and all of that stuff, what are your thoughts? I know leaders such as Governor DeSantis have called on term limits for Congress members, balanced budget amendments, and banning stock trading. What do you think are just some practical measures that we can take to ensure Congress is delivering results to the American people?
Yeah, so great question. And I remember during the State of the Union address, when the president talked about banning members of Congress from trading stocks, I looked over at Nancy Pelosi and she was sitting in her chair like, and if you watch the State of the Union, I start laughing hysterically. It's because I looked over and saw the look on Nancy Pelosi's face. I think people don't have any idea how bad the corruption is in Washington, D.C. So yeah, I love
Guys, this is going to be over in about 8 to 10 minutes. Then we're going to get to news at noon, so hang tough.
The idea of term limits for Congress. You know what I love?
Oh, we have John in the building. John's here, guys.
More. I love the idea of term limits for bureaucrats. Nobody in Washington, D.C. should be able to sit in a chair for 30 years.
Guys, John says, stop the conspiracy theories of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Tyler Robertson committed this act. People, don't be stupid. I stand with John on this particular case. I believe when I look at the facts, I don't believe the conspiracies.
Do your public service and go back home and do something productive. But look, so much of what's broken about Congress really does go down to corruption. So, there's so many examples, let's say, of a congressman who got a classified briefing on COVID. It's like, oh, there's this crazy Wuhan flu that's floating around Wuhan, China. And again, at that point, like everybody
what's happening, Molly?
Called it the Wuhan flu. And then you come out of that classified briefing and you buy a bunch of biotech stocks, or you buy a bunch of pharmaceutical stocks. Or maybe, you sell airline stocks because you know that the airlines aren't going to work that well if everybody's sort of sheltering in place and governments are shutting down the economy. That stuff should be illegal and you should go to prison for it. And
Molly, thank you very much for the super chat. Thanks for supporting the channel. You're awfully kind. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you guys who are reaching out. That's so amazing.
If you just cut out the basic corruption, you'd solve a lot of the problem.
Thank you so much.
This will be the last question.
Okay. Can we take two more? Because I like answering questions. We'll take a couple more.
Hi, Mr. Vice President. Before I get to my question, I just want to, number one, thank you for your service to the United States military. And number two, welcome you to the greatest university in this country.
Thank you.
My question is, as somebody whose parents adopted 3 children from the foster care system and coming from a broken household yourself, we have seen different sides of a somewhat similar narrative. How would you respond to somebody who says that the only way to succeed in this country is to come from a generationally wealthy family?
That's a good question. Wow, I didn't expect that one.
All right. So Will says, if Robertson is found not guilty, will you reconsider what you accept as the facts of the case? I'm going to be attending that trial. So that's what I do. I attend court cases. So after I hear all the facts, I'll come to a reasonable conclusion. But listen, I sat through Sean Diddy Combs' trial. I sat through President Trump's trial. I knew Trump was going to get those 34 felonies. I thought that Sean Diddy Combs would be found guilty, and he wasn't on those 3 major charges. So even sitting through court, you have to have an open mind, because sometimes the jury doesn't really buy. That's why you see in the case of Sean Diddy Combs, the judge was so involved. He saw all of those witnesses come in and say, like Cassie, oh, I was beaten. He saw all of that, and it put a disdain, I believe, in the judge against Sean Combs. But the jury was not buying it. So I say all of that to say, when I attend Tyler Robertson's trial myself, I sit in the courtroom, I hear all the facts, then I can answer better.
Well, first of all, it's just not true. And I think that one of the things that, a very powerful thing that somebody told me is that, disadvantage and unfairness, it is true. Not everybody started at the exact same place. Some people were dealt a much worse hand than others. But what somebody, again, this person gave me a very good piece of advice and said, no matter what hand you were dealt, you have the responsibility to play it as well as you can. And I think that for me, at least, there was something empowering for me about recognizing that, yeah, my life wasn't as easy as most other kids. Like, I wasn't born with money. I wasn't born with parents who had connections, but I still had a responsibility to God. I had a responsibility to myself to play that hand as well as I possibly could. And that was very empowering to me. So I think first the message is, look at the stories. Look at Clarence Thomas. Look at all the people in the United States who have come from very humble beginnings and achieved great things. You can believe, as I do, that we have to do a lot better job by the young people of this country, while at the same time knowing that you are the master of your own destiny. Never give up on yourself and never believe that you're a victim of circumstances, because when you believe that, you will be a victim of circumstances.
Thank you so much, and go Dogs.
She's trolling you with that.
I know.
Hi, Mr. Vice President.
Hello.
My name is Esther. This is so cool. So I know, like, the whole H-1B thing you talked about, but I am also a daughter of a legal immigrant who came here on an H-1B visa.
Sure.
So my mom and my dad, we've been here for over 10 years. I was born here, well, more than over 10 years. I'm 20 years old. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
That's okay. Take your time.
But, like, for people who have been here on H-1B visas, it's been really hard, like, getting the green card based on everything with quotas and everything. Like, my family, we're from India. The quotas are so bad, and they're still open, and they're taking the money. How do we fix the immigration system for people who have been waiting for the green cards for so long? And they're not getting it in time, because a lot of people don't know it, during the Biden administration, to get a green card, it would have taken my family 150 years.
Well, some people just come over the border, folks. That's what they do.
To get a green card.
Sure.
So how is the Trump administration, like, trying to fix that for people who have been here, are paying taxes and doing a lot of stuff that citizens do, but they can't do a lot of things that citizens do? Like, we're also looking for the American dream. Like, my parents, they send me to private Catholic school, even though sometimes we used to live paycheck to paycheck. So how is the Trump administration going to fix that for, like, people like that?
Sure. So let me just offer a couple observations there. So one, I appreciate the question. And two, what I would say is, you heard me talk about H-1B fraud, because I think there is a lot of fraud in the H-1B system. And I think you can believe on the one hand that there's a lot of fraud in the H-1B system, while also believing that there are people who have come to the United States in the past who have enriched this country. And look, I'm married to the daughter of immigrants from India, and, I love my in-laws, and they're great people, and they've been great contributors to the United States of America. But I also think that when you become an American citizen, whether your family has 9 generations of lineage in the United States, or whether your family has 0 generations of lineage in the United States, one of the responsibilities that we must expect of citizens, and of course, it's always hard to talk in specifics about your
Thanks for taking care of that, Lisa.
situation, because I don't know about it. But one of the obligations of citizens is that you have to think about the best interest of the country, and not the country you came from beforehand, and not of any sort of any group that you came from. You've got to think of yourself as an American. The system only works if everybody thinks of themselves as an American. I remember having this conversation with my father-in-law, who's an amazing guy, and it was actually during a Senate event that I had done, where I had somebody who came up to me, and I'm sure a great person, like a wonderful person. It was a Ukrainian American in Cleveland, Ohio. I was campaigning for the Senate. There are a lot of Ukrainian Americans in Cleveland, Ohio. And this person got really agitated at me because I was saying we should stop funding the Ukraine war, okay? And I still believe that, obviously, and it's one of the things I'm proudest that we've done as administration, is we've told Europe that if you want to buy weapons, you can, but the United States is not buying weapons and sending them to Ukraine anymore. We're just out of that business. It's a very good thing. But these Ukrainian American, again, a kind person, they probably didn't vote for me after this conversation, but he was kind of sticking his finger in my face saying, you need to support my country. You need to support my country. And I...
By the way, everybody, Jeff in the audience, he has served our country, boots on the ground, keeping the American people safe. Let's show Jeff some love. He's always here, but also he has a great family. Let's send some love to his children as well as family.
Said, sir, with all due respect, if you're an American, your country is the United States of America, not a place that you immigrated from, whenever that was. And it occurred to me, and I know this is the last question, I'll try to be quick here, but it occurred to me that my father-in-law, who came from India, who moved to the United States, who got an education and became an American citizen, that never once in my life has he ever said, you have to do this or you should do this because it's in the best interest of the country that I came from? And I think that attitude, to the extent that attitude dominates among the new generation of Americans, that makes Americans feel welcoming towards people, because everybody, again, whether your family's been here for 300 years or 1 second, to be an American means to look out for Americans first. And that's the perspective we have to take to our immigration policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. We'll do one more. Sorry, real quick. I love this, but I got to go.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President, and coming to UGA and allowing us to express our freedom of speech. So thank you so much. The First Lady said Epstein was not acting alone and had to be held accountable.
Oh, boy.
She said and called for a congressional hearing, but President Trump multiple times called the files a hoax. The acting attorney general said
Welcome in, Pretty.
Epstein shouldn't be a part of anything at the DOJ. If there are compromised government officials in those files, how can the public trust that this administration will hold anyone accountable when its own Justice Department is actively blocking the investigation? Given that, can you clearly articulate your stance on whether
Now, I just want to interject real quick here. So, now keep in mind, Pam Bondi was fired because she wasn't really pushing these cases against the enemies of the president as much as he wanted it to happen. But Todd Blanche took the place of Pam Bondi. And when he took her place, basically he said, listen, we've had enough of the Epstein files. Okay, we've had enough of it. It's time for the country to move on. So that's what he's talking about. He's asking about.
Federal entities should have a formal investigation. Thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, you said the Associate Attorney General or something. I haven't seen that quote, but here's my view on the Epstein matter. Number one, the guy was clearly a scumbag. Okay. Number two, he clearly had extraordinary connections, both with intelligence services, both inside the United States and outside the United States, and also with a lot of very wealthy and powerful people. Okay. Number three, I have been a firm advocate and will continue to be a firm advocate of where we have something. And you know, like, I'm probably more obsessed with this than most officials. Okay. Probably more obsessed with this than most people even in this room, is when you see somebody who says something in an email that suggests, you know, there's one email I read, and it's been a little while ago, but it was talking about, you know, one person sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein saying, oh, there were some really nice, like, pizzas and grape sodas or something like that. And I remember it sounded like the Pizzagate conspiracy theory, but here it was in like an email from a guy. And my reaction to that was, we should absolutely investigate that person. Okay. And, you know, you remind me, I'm going to follow up on that to see whether we've investigated that person, because we should. We absolutely should. When you see evidence of sexual assault, sexual misconduct, regardless of whether you're powerful or not, in fact, you should probably investigate it more if you're a powerful person, right? I don't want powerful people, you know, being involved in this disgusting behavior. But I have to defend the president on this, because when he said that it was a hoax, what he was talking about was this democratic idea that he's connected to Epstein. If you look at those emails, it's like, you know, they were in the same, you know, everybody in Palm Beach knew everybody, okay? Like, the president has said he knew Jeffrey.
Even Palm Beach Pete. Have you guys seen Palm Beach Pete? Everybody wants to see and talk to Palm Beach Pete. They say he's the new and improved Epstein. What do you guys think about that?
Epstein, and he was a scumbag. But what you see in those emails is that Jeffrey Epstein hated Donald Trump. And Donald Trump hated Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, one of the emails is about Donald Trump narking on Jeffrey Epstein to the local sheriff, saying, this guy's a scumbag. You should go and pick him up. So when Donald Trump says, when the president says this is a hoax, he's not saying it's a hoax that Epstein was the scumbag. He's not saying that it's a hoax that Epstein was connected to powerful people. He's saying this democratic idea that somehow he was Epstein's best friend, that is a hoax. And if you look at the emails, it's obvious that Jeffrey Epstein hated Donald J. Trump. And by the way, one of the best signs for whether you're a good person or not, for whether you're a decent human being, is if the worst people in the world hate your guts. The fact that Jeffrey Epstein hates Donald J. Trump is a pretty good thing for Donald J. Trump.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, by the way, just
We need to hear that from Jeffrey Epstein. We need to perhaps hear that from the cow, but we can't.
so you know, the DOJ, just before we got on stage, I guess I saw the news, has unredacted fully the 6 million documents, made it available to your congressmen and women. So put pressure on them to go give you a report of what they find.
Well, we thought they were all sitting on Pam Bondi's desk. I guess that wasn't true. Guys, let's get moving to the news at noon. Today, we're going to start off looking into the Iranian war and what President Trump has cooking in regards to this big fiasco out in the Middle East. Let's get to it.
According to Fox News, he believes the war.
Hit the like button, share, subscribe. We're going to see what the president thinks about this war and how far along and when it could potentially end.
With Iran is close to ending.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Trey Yinks, joins us live from Tel Aviv with the latest. Hey, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. President Trump laying out the latest timeline for the war with Iran in an interview with Fox News. He says he believes the conflict is close to finish, but the mission not yet complete. We do know, according to reports, that direct talks between the U.S. and Iran could take place as early as tomorrow, as the president laid out why this operation began.
I had to divert, because if I didn't do that, right now you would have Iran with a nuclear weapon. And if they had a nuclear weapon, you would be calling everybody over there, sir, and you don't want to do that.
Well, you keep saying was. Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that.
The president sounds just as sick as I do with this bronchitis, right? You can pick it up in his voice.
Country. And we're not finished.
The president's comments come as U.S. Central Command continues to block Iranian ports with more than a dozen support vessels. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper explained the impact of this move, saying, quote, a blockade of Iranian ports has been fully implemented as U.S. forces maintain maritime superiority in the Middle East. An estimated 90% of Iran's economy is fueled by international trade by sea. In less than 36 hours since the blockade was implemented, U.S. forces have completely halted economic trade going into and out of Iran by sea. The Iranians are now responding to the blockade, with the IRGC threatening to target any U.S. ships in the area. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian taking a slightly different tone.
There is now a problem in the Persian Gulf, and the world has been thrown into turmoil. This has had an impact across the world. People are dissatisfied and have raised their voices. But we ourselves are in the midst of this turmoil, and despite all these pressures, our work is progressing properly.
Iranian officials really starting to feel this pressure from the Trump administration. President Trump in that interview last night on Fox being very clear, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Guys?
Trey, right now in Israel, is there a sense progress was made in those talks with Lebanon?
Yeah, absolutely. Sources telling Fox News these were historic talks that took place yesterday, facilitated by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Direct talks between Israel and Lebanon with two key goals that both sides at this point appear to agree on. One is disarming Hezbollah, Iran's largest proxy in the Middle East that still has more than 10,000 rockets and missiles. And the second is developing peaceful relations between Israel and Lebanon. I'm told by officials here they see this
Welcome into Curtis Gilliam. He says it seems like Israel is the biggest threat.
Progress as so significant that it ultimately could lead to a normalization deal between Israel and their neighbor to the north. Guys?
All right, thanks.
Hey, John, give your father my regards here. I appreciate you tapping in today.
Thanks so much, sir.
You would think if you're getting attacked, you would just give up your enriched uranium. What's more important, having that enriched uranium or making sure your economy is doing well? Right now, it's it's the recession. No, it's the inflation.
Yeah, inflation.
180.
Yeah.
It was 30 or 40 in January when they were all protesting.
Iran's inflation is through the roof. Can you imagine that? And a lot of that is because they're digging in their heels.
And now it's worse. The economy is ruined. They've lost their Navy. They've lost all of their military. So many of their leaders have been killed. And they have this enriched uranium. You would think they would say, not worth it. Here, you can have it.
And now the president has shut down the Strait completely. And from what I hear, now China wants to come to the negotiating table. They didn't want to come to the negotiating table at first to put some pressure on Iran, but now they're going to be forced.
Right now, the latest news is that the president has opened up the Strait So he's in control. That's what we're hearing. So we'll have to see how that develops. One thing for sure, the stock market is pumping heavy today. Remember last week I was saying it's the best time to buy when the market is down, because overall, most people most of the investors, they have a lot of confidence in this president. So whether you like him or not, the stock market is responding favorably to this president. So anybody investing in some shrewd, wise companies are seeing great gains today and pretty much going forward, at least for now.
Right, but don't worry, Iran, you have all the Democrats rooting for your success. So that's the sad part.
It is.
Be sure to. Okay, guys. So we're going to move on now. We're going to talk about these scientists that have gone missing, that have been working with the UFO projects. What's going on? Remember, I reported, I was one of the first to report on William McCaslin. He went missing right from his home. It's almost like he disappeared into thin air. Well, he's not the only one that has been missing. These scientists associated with high-level UFO studies and all of that. Let's get to it. Let's check it out.
That far to make connections. I'm joined by somebody who has been tracking every one of these stories, connecting the dots herself, asking the questions that others aren't. Los Angeles Magazine contributor Lauren Conley.
You guys Lauren is a good friend of mine. She is so amazing. She covers most of these cases with me here in New York. Good to see her on the big stage. Tell me, what do you guys think in regards to this? This is a very serious matter. Do you think these scientists are just disappearing into thin air, or do you think something more sinister is happening? Let's get to it.
Great to see you again. Not wearing an alien dress. Totally fine.
Not tonight.
Who is this guy, Garcia?
Stephen Garcia, man, Jesse, this one is chilling to me because, as you said, it echoes Neil McCaslin's disappearance right down to
the same thing.
The same thing, the state of New Mexico. So Stephen Garcia, I mean, he had a top security clearance at KCNSC.
Is that per
These guys out in New Mexico, they seem to be walking into a black hole.
Source, though, a source said that.
This is per source.
Okay.
Yes, per source that was close to Garcia. But look, where he worked at KCNSC, I mean, they manufacture 80% of non-nuclear components that go into building military nuclear weapons. And I mean, he oversaw tens of millions of dollars of assets, equipment, some classified, some not. I mean, we don't know what was going on in this guy's head, right? The officials had said that he may have been a danger to himself. He was seen carrying a gun. And it sounds crazy, but between Garcia and General McCaslin, I have to wonder, and again, I know this sounds crazy, but it could.
Anderson, good to see you. I've been looking for you. Anderson says something sinister is going on. Right, yes, indeed.
Be an option here. I mean, is the government doing this? Are they taking out their own people because of XYZ? And wait, I want to point something else out to you, Jesse.
I don't even want to
literally, I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll. But tomorrow, April 14th, that is when Rep. Anna Luna gave Pete Hegseth this deadline. She requested 46 UAP videos, and look, there's a good reason behind it. I mean, these videos she detailed in this filing, and they say, you know, Iran, XYZ date, you know, 2022, Syria, XYZ date, shaped like a cigar. You know, this is a matter.
So all of these countries are reporting these UFOs or what have you. But what do you guys think? Do you guys believe that they truly exist? You think that there's a such thing as aliens? Or do you think it's something else? Put a 1 if you believe, put a 2 if you don't. Let's see.
Of national security. And this is important because in real time, we don't know what's in this.
Shout out to you, Delroy. He says, we are not alone. And if you don't believe me, stay there till it's too late. Delroy, nice to have you. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. I look forward to building with you.
Sky. We don't know if this is some kind of, you know, a UAP. We don't know if it's a drone. We don't know enough.
Are you getting any official word from authorities, investigators that are maybe trying to link these 10 episodes? Are they all disconnected? They're saying you can't make a connection because, again, I mean, you think you laid it out very well. There are eerie similarities.
Of course there are. You're absolutely right. And I've reached out to Rep. Burleson's office, Rep. Burchett's office, and I did hear back from Burleson's office last week.
Okay, guys, Slappy says there are things flying around, but they aren't alien. Thank you.
And look, they said, they haven't heard directly from the White House, and they haven't brought up General McCaslin's disappearance at all.
Pretty says a lot of people are unsure. X says absolutely alien life is real. There's so much evidence. Okay, thank you.
They were being very safe with me, I want to say. Rep. Burchett's office didn't respond to me at all, but Burchett just
Guys, let's hit the like button, share, subscribe. Thank you very much.
said, I forget what show he was on, but he just said he talked to, quote, folks at the White House about this and that President Trump is about to do some disrupting. I just don't believe it. Obama tried to release these UFO files. Clinton tried to release them. Nothing happened. I get it. People think Trump is different, but what's so different? I mean,
there has been a lot of questions about, did they get any call? Did they get any messages? Because just to leave the house, allegedly armed, in such a strange way. I mean, even with McCaslin, there's an allegation that he didn't want.
On video, Barack Obama, former president of the United States, said that these things were real. And then shortly thereafter, the president of the United States came forward and said that Barack Obama should not be giving out this secret classified information. Notice he didn't say he's lying or anything to that effect. He says he's giving out classified information. So it makes you wonder, obviously, there are some things they know that we don't.
Want to be found, and anything about what they were up to in the days, weeks, hours before?
So there is nothing public, and I mean, I am digging right now.
Yeah.
It's tough. You want to reach out to family members, you want to reach out to friends, but you want to do it in a way that's not so invasive. I mean, their family members are missing. This is very serious. And I saw a Facebook post, Stephen Garcia's, I think it was his niece, who was like, has anyone seen my uncle? Just begging, pleading. And so you really have to think about, the protections for whistleblowers as well. There's so much that needs to be said, and it's terrible.
You might not know the answer to this. Did they know each other? Did any of these people know each other, work together in the same Venn diagram? I mentioned New Mexico together, but...
Right, well,
So there's some 10 people, many of them scientists working on this classified information that have gone missing, basically just walked out of time, very similar to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Like, what's happening, folks?
Discussed last week, we discussed Monica Reza, who worked alongside or underneath Neil McCaslin, and they both were stationed at Wright-Patterson.
Now, she worked with Bill McCaslin, William McCaslin. She went missing too. What are the coincidences that these people are just disappearing?
So there is a connection there. I haven't made connections between any of the others just yet. I do know that it is interesting. Carl Grillmayer, I've been looking into his death, the Caltech astrophysicist. I did notice some neighbors in the area, and he lives in a very remote area. They also worked in aerospace research, which, again, I wish I had all day to focus on this story, Jesse. I really do. But
Growski says it's the art of deception. Great comment. All of these people are just missing.
But I'll get there. I will.
It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's being amplified.
It's not easy to replace a scientist, and all of a sudden you don't have them anymore. And there's two handful of these individuals. Now we're going to look into what's happening with the Strait in regards to the president of the United States.
Hopes for an end to this fighting. And in the U.S., stocks surged close to records set in January. Now, meanwhile, in Washington, the first direct talks in depth.
Now, remember last week I predicted this would happen. So today we're really seeing the great effects of the stock market, but also gas prices are going up and also food as well. But the oil has come down considerably.
Decades between the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors to the
Just that thought alone doesn't make sense, but this is the way of the world right now.
U.S. concluded on a productive note Tuesday. That's according to the U.S. State Department. An initial round of talks held last weekend, though, in Pakistan, aimed at permanently ending the U.S.-Iran conflict, failed to produce an agreement. The White House said Iran's nuclear ambitions were a central sticking point. Now, President Trump saying that this war could be coming to a close shortly. Here, I want to play out this soundbite from Fox Business.
I had to divert, because if I didn't do that, right now you would have Iran with a nuclear weapon. And if they had a nuclear weapon, you would be calling everybody over there, sir. And you don't want to do that.
Well, you keep saying was. Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right
The president's like, I don't know, you tell me, right?
now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country. And we're not finished. But we'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
That was a post there from President Trump. My producer's actually just flagging for me here. This is a new Truth Social that the White House just shared from President Trump, saying China is very happy that I am permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm doing it for them. Also,
So you see that the strait is open. And remember, the president goes to China next month for the big hoorah. And I can imagine he wants to have all the best fanfare and publicity as he goes to China. So it looks like he has the strait open. The question is, how will Iran respond to all of this?
and the world. This situation will never happen again. They have agreed not to send weapons to Iran. All right, joining us now is Jonathan Saee with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to break this all down for us.
Hi, Christy. It's great to be with you again.
Let's just start with this news that just came out from the White House, that post there from President Trump speaking on the Strait of Hormuz. What's your initial reaction to that?
Well, it's no surprise that ultimately China wants the goods to the supply chain to still flow through the strait. Even though when we talk about the strait being closed or open, we should not be looking at it in black and white terms. This is something that Tehran was dictating as to who gets to pass, and Chinese vessels were allowed to cross. But that said, that doesn't mean the supply chain as a whole was resolved, which is ultimately something that China prefers for it to be open. Frankly, most countries in the world are still implicated by these economic challenges. So that's not necessarily a surprise. But let's see how.
You know, when you really think about it, it's like you come home and the smallest child in the house says, from now on, I'm the daddy, I'm the mommy, right? I'm going to control everything. It's almost like a laughing situation because they don't have the power. So even if Iran says that they're going to turn things around, the United States of America, by means of the President of the United States, have them cornered pretty much in every way. And it only gets murkier as time goes on if they keep fighting back. So I think this is the reason why we see the stock market spreading probably at record numbers today. And again, I tell you, go look up SoFi Technologies. Last week when I told you guys about it, it was at $14. Today it's at $18.75 and climbing. It has to get to $45 a share so that Anthony Noto can receive his $450 million sign-on bonus. That's the deal they gave him. He was the individual that built Twitter before Elon Musk purchased it and kind of moved him on. So do your research. It could be worth your time at learning more about that particular stock.
Effective this blockade will be, because the key term with any economic pressure, whether it's going to be sanctions or this naval blockade, is persistence. If the idea is for us to somehow build leverage, then it's going to take time. So that's going to be a bit challenging to want to end the war really soon, but at the same time be tapping into tools that are really for a long-term strategy. But we have to wait and see whether the administration is simply trying to build leverage for talks, or they're just...
Guys, we have Amy in the building. Amy says, I trust Trump. There were no wars under his first administration. Thank you, Amy. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. Thanks for locking in. Thanks.
Using this blockade to deprive the regime of cash flow, to maybe tap into something internal, might want to deprive the repression apparatus and the military establishment from a salary so they can get some internal fractures. We have to wait and see.
And as we're taking a live look there at the Strait of Hormuz, President Trump saying he's permanently opening the strait. Really, when we're talking about oil prices and what we can expect going forward over the next coming days or weeks here, as now people are getting excited that talks may resume. What can we expect to see out of the Strait of Hormuz here?
Of course, markets are going to react to perception more than what's really the facts on the ground.
Stefan says, MAGA, the stupidest of the stupid forever. Okay.
Still, some Iranian vessels were able to allegedly pass the blockade. Again, none of it is necessarily confirmed, and it doesn't specify what vessels they were, nor did it say which ports they eventually used. But for this blockade to be also long-term and parallel strategy needs to be some sort of a humanitarian channel, because Iran still relies heavily on food, grains, and different material that it imports, medicine as well. So we need to ensure that we don't let the regime win the PR battle. We want to ensure that, similar with the maximum pressure campaign, it is very clear for the world to see that our blockade is specifically against Iranian illicit oil exports, arm exports and imports, and it's not there to target the average Iranian. That's very critical. But when we talk about any form of
last week, one of the reporters had asked the president of the United States, because keep in mind, Iran was receiving $2 million per ship per day just to get through. And that's for those that were lucky and selected to go through. But when they asked the president of the United States to say about a toll being charged to get through, he says, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, because at first he thought she was referring to the United States of America, but she was actually talking about Iran. But then the president says that would be great, but he says we will be the ones charging a toll. So the president is looking at every avenue to make money, especially when it comes to the United States of America.
economic pressure on a regime, and similar conditions here also apply.
Now, I also wanted to ask you about this, with both sides signaling an in-principle agreement, which is what it's being called here, to extend the ceasefire. How real is the momentum towards a lasting deal this time?
So I think we heard that the sticking point again is Iran's nuclear ambitions, and on the surface it seems like there's a compromise. On one hand, Washington says halt enrichment for 20 years. Then Tehran's rebuttal was, let's say, 5 or 10 years. But the issue with that is, similar with the JCPOA, we haven't heard the details, meaning we don't know what the halt to enrichment means. Are they going to give up all their centrifuges, or are they simply going to just temporarily put them out of order? And that was the challenge with the JCPOA. They still maintain a lot of their centrifuges. They still, in theory, were able to have a close breakout period. If this is going to be the same situation where Iran doesn't give up most of its centrifuges, then that begs the question, how is it going to be any better or reliable than the...
So we get the idea of what's happening. We're going to keep following what's happening with the war in Iran. It looks like it might be coming to a halt if nothing else kicks off, but we'll get to that. We'll keep following. Now we're going to see what happened at a school. It's quite dramatic. I want to give you a warning that this could show some sort of violence. So, be prepared in case you don't want to see it.
Video of the heart-stopping moments a gunman walks into Pauls Valley High School in Oklahoma. You can see a pistol in hand. But watch what unfolds next. Principal Kirk Moore in the blue shirt emerging from another door and tackling the suspect, identified by police as 20-year-old Victor Hawkins, a former...
Shout out to that principal. He really turned into a superhero to prevent maybe a travesty that could have happened at that school. I don't like the way he was pulling that off. It looked kind of dangerous. He really put himself in harm's way. He really didn't have any strategic way of doing it, but he did the best he could to prevent this from happening.
Student of the school. Just feet away, you can see a young person slip out during Moore's fast-acting efforts. Authorities say the principal was shot in the chaos, but managed to get the suspect to drop the gun. Another staff member then scrambling to pick it up.
It doesn't surprise me, the actions that he took, but it is amazing at the actions that he took. There's not a doubt in my mind that he saved kids' lives yesterday.
In a statement, Moore said in part, like so many educators around the country, we prepare for these events. I'm grateful that my instincts and training, as well as God's hand, were available to me. The suspect...
Typically in those situations, people tend to run for cover, right? Hit the deck, but he ran for the trouble. And he did a good job, because obviously the guy did not take anyone's life, especially children at school. But my heavens, what's happening in the world? It seems like every day there's something new. There's something outrageous happening in our backyards. When I was traveling to D.C. a couple weeks ago, there was a double murder happening. I believe it was, somewhere around Hopewell, I believe, or Caroline County. 2 young guys, teenagers, their lives were snuffed out from them. Other teenagers, it appears, took them out. We have this incident that someone's going into a school. Every day there's something new, and you just have to wonder, why are people so mad? Why are they doing harsh things to people who are so innocent? A lot of us have been covering Nancy Guthrie and so many more cases. We just covered how all of these scientists are going missing. It's hard to believe that all of them chose to take their own lives. I find that hard to believe. And it appears that there's a lot of staging happening. People are trying to cover their tracks more and more every day with many of these cases. But you have to wonder, what are people smoking? What are they on that they become so violent? Or has man always been violent from the early days of when writing was formed and before? Has the heart of man always been so vile?
I told investigators he was inspired by the Columbine school shooting, according to an affidavit. He now faces numerous charges.
Okay, guys, Pretty says they're all frustrated with Trump. That's why they're acting out. That's why they're doing these crazy things. Anderson says there are wolves, sheep, and sheepdogs. This principle is a sheepdog protecting the herd. All right, thank you very much. That's a good illustration, analogy. Thank you so much.
Including shooting with intent to kill, as the shaken school community is grateful no one was killed, thanks to the heroic
Country Carpenter says they're all frustrated with corruption. Okay, thank you.
actions of their principal. Emily Ikeda, NBC News.
Wow, he did such a good job, though. He did the best he could. He was able to conquer the fella to keep him from really causing harm. We're going to just go back and catch one more point about the President of the United States when it comes to China and the secret letter. Let's get to it, and then we're going to call it a day, folks. It's been a great day to be here. We've checked out JD Vance. I want to know, before we leave, if you guys have more confidence in JD Vance, less confidence. So if you have a lot more confidence in JD Vance right now, put a 1 in the chat. If you have less confidence in JD Vance, put a 2 or put a 3 if you just don't care. All right, let's just see what everybody thinks. But we're going to check out now the secret letter between China and the United States.
Your meeting coming up next month with President Xi. I want to get your take on China and how this shift in oil, particularly because of Iran, particularly because of Venezuela and what you've done, even your comments on Cuba. How does that change the dynamic of this meeting with President Xi?
I don't think it does. I mean, he's somebody that needs oil. We don't. He's somebody I get along with very well. He just wrote me a beautiful letter.
He wrote you a letter?
Yeah, he did. He responded to a letter that I wrote because I had heard that.
Wow, the leader of China wrote the President of the United States a beautiful letter. Would you believe?
China is giving weapons to, you're seeing it all over the place, to Iran, that China is giving weapons.
Did he say he's giving them?
Yeah, and I wrote him a letter asking him not to do that. And he wrote me a letter saying that essentially he's not doing that.
Okay. Well, we just heard from the FBI recently that there was a major cyber attack attributed to China. What response is under consideration for that cyber attack?
We do it to them.
Jeff says he wants to see some proof. He doesn't necessarily believe what the President of the United States is saying. All right. Pretty says, I don't believe a thing Trump says. Okay.
They do it to us. We do it to them. You know.
Well, when was the last time we did a cyber attack in China?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you that. But we do them. They do us. It's been like that for a long time.
So it's not going to be addressed?
I'll address things. But, you know, it is what it is. Look, China's China. They're never easy, but we're doing great with China. I'm the toughest person in China anywhere in the world. I put on 100% tariff on Chinese cars. We don't have a Chinese car in the whole country. And if you look at Europe, they're being inundated with Chinese cars, and it's killing their car companies, okay? There's nobody tougher than me. Don't forget, I put a 20% tariff on them for what they've done with fentanyl. I put a penalty. I call it a penalty. I put a 45% tariff. I had a 145% tariff where they literally were going to go out of business. Look, There's never been anybody tougher in China than me, but I also have a good relationship with President Xi, and that's a good thing. Remember this, TikTok, billions and billions of dollars, not the biggest thing in terms of China, bigger is the other things I do, but everybody said they will never approve the deal, it's a hard no. President Xi said, it's a hard no, we will never do it. Then American business people got together, paid billions of dollars, and I called up President Xi, I said, be a good thing if you did it. And he did it.
All right. And he did it. Just like that, he did it, folks. You heard it from the President of the United States. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. We covered a lot of ground, especially when it came to JD Vance, the President of the United States, and also the Pope. What did you guys think in regards to the Pope? You know what I found to be quite interesting? JD Vance says that he's a Catholic, right? He's a Catholic, but when it came down to choosing between the Pope and the President of the United States, he has typically sided with the President. Typically, what you find is that individuals will always side with their God or with their religion, but in this particular case, we heard it from JD Vance. He did not make any type of delay in expressing that he is rolling with the president. In fact, he said the Pope is the one who needed to have an adjustment to adjust his thinking. What do you guys think about that? Right now, we're starting to see that a lot of people in the comments are Bible believers, yesterday we had a lot of individuals from Islam here. But every generation kind of gives us a way of peering into some of the stories that we find in the Bible. Earlier in this particular live, we talked about how when you go back to the Hebrew scriptures, the God of the Hebrew scriptures from Genesis to Malachi was a God that told the Israelites, the Jews, to go in and conquer other nations. In the book of Esther, I think they conquered some 75,000 individuals from Persia. Well, do you guys know who is the modern day Persia? Who is the modern day Persia? Well, it's Iran. So if you go back to the Bible times, you'll find that Israel and Iran or Persia have been fighting for years. There's stories about how the Persians have freed the Israelites and so forth and so on. Also, when you go back in history, you'll find, and you can research this, that one of the longest standing religions ever was actually Persia, and that's where Iran stemmed from. Much older than the Bible writings and also much older than the Israelites. A lot of the Israelites' culture actually came from Iran, but a lot of people just don't know that because they haven't bothered to do the research and learned about Zoroastrianism. That's what it's called. If you want to go check out the religion, you can find this information out. But one thing's for sure, as we look at these particular wars that are happening throughout the world, you have the United States, which is typically a Christian nation, right? If you look at the laws, you know where Israel, you know where they stand, right, as far as their God. And then you have the Muslims, Islam, and so forth. Everybody has their own distinct God, but when we go to war, everybody's praying to their God. But the question is, when the people lose the war, what does that mean from their God? Does it mean that they don't have God's approval? A lot of times when it came in the Hebrew scriptures with the Israelites, whenever they lost a battle, they attributed that to not having God's favor. And so could you imagine even now with Iran, and they're taking all of these losses, you see the United States dropping so many bombs, and the list goes on and on. A lot of times these nations, when that happened, they go back and tell the people, they say, well, the reason why we lost the war is because you don't have God's favor. You haven't been following the rules. Then they go back and they put more taskmaster type of behavior on the people. It happens throughout the Bible, especially when it comes to the Israelites, right? If you go back to ancient Israel, now we're not talking about modern Israel, the state of Israel. which many say is more of Zionism. We're not talking about them, but I continually tell you guys that many of the senators, the congressmen, because of what they hear on church on Sunday and being a Christian, a lot of times under the Christian way, you encompass the entire Bible. So that's from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And at the beginning of the Bible, within the Torah, the first 5 books, especially in Deuteronomy chapter 8, you're hearing that Israel is God's chosen people, and anybody that bless Israel is going to be blessed. Anybody that curse Israel is going to be cursed. And that's why you have individuals like Ted Cruz. I actually showed you guys a video. Ted Cruz says, hey, when we make our decisions for the government, we still look through this lens that the Bible says that if you bless Israel, you're going to be blessed. If you curse Israel, you're going to be cursed, right? So a lot of the things that we see today, the things that affect us in our lives, it all stems back to books. You have the Bible, you have the Quran, and people are afraid to steer away from any of the teachings. And instead of looking at the government or looking at life for the overall benefit of what's happening at the time, a lot of them are looking at this all through the lens of the Bible. They're making Bible decisions for people who may not even believe in God. But I say all of that to say, especially in the Bible, when we look back at Israel, the earlier Israelites, I don't want to get into it too deeply, but in the ancient times, the God would preside over the land. So that's why even today, you hear about the Holy Land in Israel, because when you go back to the Bible and the earlier books, you'll see that when they were in Israel, then the God was Yahweh or Jehovah. When they went into Canaan, the God was Baal or whatever the land was. When they went into Iran, which was Persia at the time, then they would have the Persian God of Mazda, right? So when they lost these battles, that meant that they lost God's favor. That's the way they looked at it. And so that's why if you go through the history of the Israelites, every time they failed in a war, they always came back and told the people, listen, the reason why we lost this war is because you guys are not following the holy text enough. You're not doing enough. You're not paying enough. And then sometimes even nowadays in the modern churches, we're not giving enough. We're not paying enough tithes. You see what I'm saying? You see how this all translates? A lot of people, though, are not religiously inclined. 2 weeks ago, I showed you guys that they show that 100,000 churches are, now this is hard facts, 100,000 churches are set to be closing in the United States alone. That's a lot of churches. A lot of these churches have been bombarded with SA abuse. A lot of these cases I have covered, especially in the lower districts of the United States. So you have individuals taking advantage of young children. There's so many court cases. In fact, here in New York right now, we have this big case of a pastor. He's a huge pastor. I really need you guys to bear with me for this one story. I'm going to cover his case, although I don't want to, because he had this big congregation out in California. And you know what they say he was doing? He was taking advantage of the young children in the congregation. So in California, they gave him 17 years. Okay. So now he's preparing to go to trial here in New York federal court. They're going to try him in New York for these same claims. But do you know the weird thing about it? Even though this man has been found guilty of doing some deplorable things as a pastor, as a leader of the flock, guess what? A lot of his congregation members are here in New York coming to his trial, and they still look at him as being a holy one of God. My heavens, what is going on in the world? So even after all of these deplorable things have happened, people still see these individuals as holy men. They see them something like the Son of Man. They see them close to being to Jesus in many ways. So I say all of that to say, even though you may not believe, right, doesn't matter. You still have to bear with the same consequences of people that do believe, because the structure, in other words, when you go to court here in the United States of America, right, what do they have you do? They have you swear on your Bible predominantly, but they'll let you use, a substitution if you believe something different. But everything is based on the fact, because they want to introduce God into the picture, because they figure that when nobody is looking, if you believe in God, then you'll do the right thing. It's almost like the 10 Commandments in the Bible. If you notice, look at what those 10 Commandments are. You can't steal, you can't kill, you can't mess around with somebody else. You get the drift of what I'm saying. So, all of the construct of our country is based predominantly on Christianity, and that's why we have what we see now as Christian nationalism. You notice that this administration, JD Vance today, and that's why I try to show you guys every video. JD Vance is essentially saying, I was an atheist. I didn't believe in God at some point, right? But now I'm a believer, you see? And you can see him catching the Holy Ghost or whatever from JD Vance. All of a sudden now, when it's time to get into office and become the vice president for Donald Trump, JD Vance is a holy man. The only one that pretty much has held a consistency of not really being religiously inclined, although he will try to, tell you, is Elon Musk. He has, I don't need to explain, with a lot of the billionaires, they are not believers, and we could actually get into it at a different time. But the president of the United States, JD Vance, all of these men, this time around, they really embrace Christianity, and we see the fruitage that comes from embracing Christianity, because now they're seen as holy men of God, and there's a certain amount of trust that comes when you're a holy man of God. And you saw what happened with Madoff. When Madoff wanted to take advantage of people and to get their billions of dollars, Madoff started in the church. You know why he started in the church? Because they knew him. They saw Madoff there 30 years. Madoff would never take my money, right? Madoff would never do me wrong. And see, that's the case that I showed you guys is happening here in New York City. People let their children go with the pastor, right? Even with the Jehovah's Witnesses, there's so many cases, people out preaching, and then all of a sudden, a young man, young child, they go off with a guy that's an elder. Oh, Elder Joseph would never do anything to my child. And see, that's how we have all these cases that I'm covering here in New York City, where people under the umbrella of the church have taken advantage of minors. And I could show you some of these individuals, their lives are destroyed forever because they were touched inappropriately by people who pretended to be men of God, okay? So I say all of this to show that whether you're religiously inclined or not has nothing to do with it, because you're living in a world where all of these ancient religions, they preside heavily over our lives, whether you like it or not. I could actually show you where you're paying all of this money at the pump. I could tie that all the way back, not to Iran, not to Israel, but I'll tie it all the way back to where it stems from. And it goes back to the Holy Land, these religions, and they're fighting because the books are saying, no, Israel, you're supposed to have the Holy Land, and the Messiah is going to come back and he's going to build the third temple. And guess what, guys? You're starting to hear J.D. Vance talk about the third temple. You're starting to hear Jared Kushner talking about the third temple, right? They're talking about Jesus coming back for this. Well, the Jews don't believe in Jesus, right? They say he was a prophet. So I have to switch this up. I'm talking that Christian talk, right? The Jews say the Messiah, because when you go into the Hebrew scriptures, the Messiah had certain characteristics that he would have, that he would do. In fact, did you know the Messiah would have a son? See, that's not a Christian concept. You won't hear that from a Baptist church. But if you go to the Hebrew side of it, there's certain prophecies about the Messiah. But this Messiah, one of the key ingredients is that the Messiah was supposed to come back and build a temple on the Holy Land, right? This is a fact. He was supposed to come back and build this temple, but guess what happened? Under Rome, right, we have the Christian text developing around 2,000 years ago, and that's when Jesus comes on the scene. That's why the Jews don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe in Jesus. And you know why they don't believe that Jesus would be the Messiah? Because he didn't fulfill a lot of the prophecies that were in the Hebrew scriptures. I hope you guys are still with me. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, stay with him. Stay with him. All right. So Jesus, because he didn't fulfill a lot of the prophecies that the Jews are looking for, that's why today they do not accept Jesus at all. You have the Christians, right? Christians means follower of Christ. Stick with me. I'm going to show you how all this ties into your life here, because we're living in a country where everybody wants to push Christian nationalistic concepts. They want everybody to be under the guise of a Christian. In fact, even when it comes to MAGA now, MAGA is synonymous with Christianity. We didn't have that going back a few years back, but it's a concept that's developed because now it's a great way to bring people together, and it's important to understand that. But when it comes to Jesus, right, if you actually go through the Gospels, you'll start to realize that Jesus did not build this temple. In fact, when he came through, the Messiah, according to the Hebrew scriptures, wasn't supposed to be performing miracles. But now, if you read the Gospels, Jesus is coming along. One of his first miracles, he's turning water to wine at a wedding, and his mother's trying to figure out what's happening. In fact, his mother and his siblings thought he was crazy. She's like, this is my son. How is he out here performing these miracles? And then also you'll find in the Hebrew, in the Gospels, from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Mark was written first, then Matthew, then Luke, then John. You'll start to find that a lot of these miracles that he was performing, the Jews did not accept that, because that wasn't what the Messiah was said to do. The Messiah was supposed to come in and have specific characteristics. And even to this day, if you go to the Jews, if you see one, say, hey, do you believe in Jesus? They're going to say, well, yeah, he may have been a prophet. But if you get into the actual storyline and you really look into the story of Jesus and how when Pilate had Jesus come before him, okay, when he came before him, notice whoever's writing the Gospels, they're writing it in a way to the Jews to take responsibility for the death of Jesus. And that's why when Jesus came before the governor Pilate, right, Pilate says, I see no fault with this man, right? Who has a problem with him? And you know what the Jews said when Pilate gave them the ability to choose between Jesus and Barabbas? They chose to put Jesus to death. And you know what the Jews said? This is very important. You won't hear this in church. The Jews said, let Jesus' blood be upon us and our children. Okay? This is what the Jews said, right? So it's quite confusing, because the guys that are pushing these narratives, if I was to really question a guy like JD Vance and say, JD Vance, sit here and let's talk about the Bible, I'm probably going to lose him in the smoke, right? Because a lot of people are just pushing these concepts because they have some certain gain that they want. And the gain is working, because the minute you embrace Christianity, now your votes are going to be tremendous, right? In fact, I'm going to vote for you because you're my brother. In fact, in the church, what did we say? What do people say in the church? They say they're brothers. This is my sister, right? So notice what JD Vance said. He said something different. He started off today, and this is important, and I'll leave. JD Vance says, I'm a Catholic. Okay. A lot of people are trying to figure out. Now, I just came back from Rome. I could really break it down with my studies. But anyway, okay. He says, I'm a Catholic, but when it comes to these situations, I'm going to go with the president. I'm going to put the religion aside. In fact, he told the Pope, he said, listen, you need to stay in your corner. You go over there and pray, and you just let us do war. And then what did JD Vance say? There's a reason why I play these videos, folks. JD Vance says in the Bible, it says war. You're supposed to go in war with your neighbor, right? That is so true. And guess what? Even when it comes to slavery, if you go to Deuteronomy, most people, when they're doing their religious studies, there's a lot of things that they overlook. But I also today, I stand before you, I sit before you, and I just challenge you to go and do your research. When you go to Deuteronomy and you go to these various books of the Bible, it gives you the stipulations for slavery. And it says that you could beat your slave. This is in Deuteronomy. I'll take on anybody, bring them my way. It says in Deuteronomy, right? You can beat your slave. And as long as he don't die, there's no punishment for you. But if he dies after 2 or 3 days, then you're going to have to suffer the penalty. So the Bible has stipulations in Deuteronomy. It also has stipulations in Deuteronomy when it comes to, we can't use the R word here, but it also breaks down the violation of a young girl. This is in the Bible. Anybody have a problem, I could take you to the scriptures. But the scriptures lay out that if a woman was violated by a man, he would have to marry her. Did you guys hear me? You won't hear this on Sunday. You have to marry her, and you have to give the father, the man that violates this young lady, has to now go pay her father, I think it's 30 shekels. 30 shekels? Why is this written in the holy book, right? But here's the thing. When it's in the holy book, they feel like they can do it. You follow what I'm saying? That's why JD Vance said today, we can go to war and we can kill people. We can do all of this. You know why? Because the Bible said so. You got to pay attention. There's a reason why we sit all day and watch these videos, right? But we're looking at it from a higher level. And at the end of the day, what do people do? They use religion for their own gain. And it may not be a righteous gain, because whoever wrote some of these scriptures in the Bible, you can tell that they had their own intentions too, right? But so they embrace this national Christianity so as to just automatically, you meet a guy, okay? Let me give you guys an example. I used to be heavy into religion, okay? And I used to be at the headquarters of a religion, right, until I kind of woke up. But I was traveling. My mother was dying from cancer, and I was traveling back to Virginia. This is probably 20 years ago. I was driving. I went over the Delaware Bridge, and my car broke down. The alternator died. You know what I did? I called to the local church or the congregation. I said, hey, I'm from the headquarters. I just broke down. Those guys came out on the highway. They got me. They put me up for the night. And they even paid for me to fix my car because of the Christianity, because of the brotherhood, right? And that's a beautiful thing. Do not get it twisted. That's amazing. But what I'm saying is that same type of ideology is used for people to try to unite with strangers they don't even know. But like those guys, they didn't know me from a hole in the wall, right? But they came to my aid because of the religion, okay? So I say all of that just to break down what JD Vance was saying. And he's essentially telling you how they use the Bible and they also use religion, right? And it comes together in a way to where now you can see people winning elections and the list goes on and on. I think I said enough for today. I'm going to go through a few of the comments. I didn't mean to go this far into it, But in my day-to-day life, this is what I do. This is what I study. So I'm not new to this. Don't get it twisted. But I try to stay away from it for this show. But today you guys called me. I was on one. But anyway, I just want to make one. So here's the final point for today. We're going to go back to the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's very important to understand this, right? If you and I could do a show on this, but I did a poll and nobody really wants to hear it. So I'm just going to say this and let it go. Okay? The Jews were saying, Jesus' blood be on us and our children. So that means for generations to come, that means they hated Jesus so much, they're willing to put his blood on all Jews. So if you really stop and you think about that, whoever's writing the Gospels, and even if you go to the Apostle Paul, they're writing a very sharp text, and they're writing a narrative in a way that's going to be more influential than AI could ever be. Whoever wrote the text, especially the Gospels and the writings of the Apostle Paul, they've written on the hearts of men. In other words, what I'm saying is the writings are so strong, right? Like a religion that I was associated with. Check this out. They had a policy where you could not have a blood transfusion. No blood transfusion, okay? So you know what that means? That means when a person was dying from cancer, the doctor say, listen, if you want to continue with your life, you cannot have a blood transfusion, okay? That person, first thing comes to their mind is the scripture in Acts where it says abstain from blood. And they choose to die because they did not want to inhibit their relationship with God. So do you know how powerful that is? That's how strong religion is. And we just wiped out the Ayatollah of the Iranian people. That's almost like taking out Jesus. It really is. He's second in command to God. He's like the earthly representation of God. And we wiped out the Ayatollah and their top 40, cleared them right out. But I try to show you with the illustration I use about the blood transfusion to show that when you tap into people on their religious side, they never recover from it. They'll spend the rest of their lives trying to take you out. That's a real fact, right? Because they feel like you're tampering with their holy book or their holiness or their holy God. And I don't think people truly understand that these people, in many cases, they're born into religion and they believe it with all their heart. And it's really hard because, and that's the beautiful thing about religion. And if you go, I'll use an example of the 10 Commandments, right? Everybody's familiar with the 10 Commandments. When it says thou shalt not steal, that means you can leave your gold out and you don't have to worry about the constituents of your religion taking that gold. You know why? Because God is watching them. So even when nobody's looking, they say, God is watching me. I will not take your gold. So you see how man has manipulated man in ways that are far, far hard to understand. And I guarantee you, because today we don't have people writing this way, but a lot of these books that were etched before we had cell phones, technology, any of that, you have people with all of this advancement in life, and their lives are based on book, on scripture, on text, right? But when it comes to anti-Semitism, whoever's writing, I want you guys, you got to really catch this, and I'll leave it. Whoever's writing into this book that the Jews are saying against Jesus, let Jesus' blood be upon us and our family, that's not by design, folks. Somebody wrote that with a purpose. And when I went to Rome and I actually did all this research for myself and I saw it, I've been to the Vatican, I've been to Pompeii, I've been to all of these places, I started to realize who was instrumental and why the Romans were able to take over so many people. And what I like to do as a final thing, I would challenge each and every one of you. We have the Metropolitan Museum here in New York City. I think you should go, and you'll start to see the development of religions. And it'll take you all the way back to Egypt, and it's going to be mind-blowing because you'll start to see how the Greeks came in, they conquered the Egyptians, right? They took over different ideology, right? And then they took it, and then when Greece was tied into Rome, then Rome took those Grecian ideas that came from Egypt, and then you start to develop a different concept. So these religions, they all evolved. And that's why many of them have similar of the same traits, but they're quite different. In fact, if you look at Christianity, we talk about Christian nationalism. I could tell you how it could pose a big problem, and this would be my last point. Depending on which Christian you talk to, some believe that Jesus is God. And as you heard from JD Vance earlier, what did he say? He said, for those of us Christians that believe that Jesus is the Son of God. So it depends on which Christian you're talking to. You have to say, well, do you believe that Jesus is God? Or do you believe that he's the Son of God? But they all, everybody's reading the same Bible. You follow? So I'm going to try to leave on that because I could keep going. But I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. I wanted to help you understand what JD Vance is saying, but I wanted to show you from the standpoint of religion, from the Bible, the Quran, all of the holy books, right? And how these books now are used to push the political agendas of men. And sometimes it may not be to your best benefit, right? Many people are crying now for whatever reason, and it's stemming from something that they don't even have a clue. In fact, when the people try to stop you to say, listen, come with me and let me show you God, and the pastor say, oh, Jesus, and oh, my God, and and they start telling you all that, a lot of people said, no, my grandmother used to be there. I don't want to be a part of it. But it's affecting your life, especially now, because now we're seeing Christian nationalism at the highest level, and it may not be the same package that you're acquainted with when you necessarily go to your church, because so many people have different philosophies. So I'm not giving you a spin on it. Everybody's entitled to their religion, their thoughts. We have so much freeness here, and it's a beautiful thing. It makes us all unique. But it's also, we need to understand that something is happening now at a higher level, and don't allow things to be put on you or be slid in your cup or make you drink this or make you sip this Kool-Aid, right? All because you identify with the name. Because sometimes these sheep, they come in wolves' clothing, right? And the next thing you know, you're sitting somewhere trying to figure out, how did I get myself into this position? I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. I hope I didn't push on anybody's buttons. I'm just trying to help you. I think I didn't really target anybody's religion. I just try to help you guys understand how right now religion is playing a key part, and there's so many different religions, but it's playing a key part in what we see on the world scene. And in fact, it's religion versus religion at the end of the day. But it's not until the United States has officially taken on this national Christianity that I think we're going to start to see more of this develop, right? Because when it comes to Israel, I wish I could tell you here today how the Christians are treated in Israel, right? But on the microphone, they're going to tell you, oh, we love the Christians. Whoo, we love the Christians. Whoo. But on the ground, it's something different. So don't fall for the tricks and don't fall for the okie dokes. My name is Mel. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you back tomorrow at noon. Actually, I'll see you back tonight at with Candace Kelly. We have a great show for you tonight at 8 p.m. And until then, be well. We'll have news at noon again tomorrow at Eastern Standard Time. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Even though we might see things differently, I'm up for the challenge. That's how iron sharpens iron, because you strike me with your concept, I strike you with mine. All the while, we're all getting sharper, and we're becoming beautiful, and we're becoming better people. And I often will tell you guys, I don't care what type of dish you claim that you can cook or you can bake, you can put the ingredients in, right? But it's not until you add the heat that you really know. It's not until you add the crucible that you understand what you truly have, because that heat is what's going to define and let everybody know what you really got. And I hope it's something great. Until then, be good, all right?
Different voices, but the same song. Living a world where we all belong. Kindness leading the way, breaking the chains. In the symphony of love, the thing remains. Embracing diversity, brighter days in sight. Watching the world share in love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. The colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand.